Hi, I'm Angus Kress Gillespie, your host for Old Ways in New Jersey, here on East Brunswick Television. I'm here today with Hidayat Khan, a renowned sitar musician. Now, the sitar is a plucked string instrument used in Hindu music and Indian classical music. Hidayat is the seventh in an unbroken chain of sitar players. He started learning music at the tender age of 4. Under the direction of his father, he excelled in vocal music and gave his first public performance in India at the age of 9. Hidayat is currently known for his innovative blending of Indian classical music with other musical styles, including hip-hop, Latin, Spanish, techno, and electronica. It's my pleasure to welcome Hidayat Khan to our studio today. Welcome to our studios here in East Brunswick. Let me begin with the obvious question. How were you first introduced to the sitar?
That's a story, actually. So I am the 7th generation musician in a line of, my unbroken line of musicians, actually. When my mother was pregnant with me, she was given the sitar that was about this small, just to sort of play it and get used to it. To gift that sort of into the genes of the baby. So that's how it happens in our families, that that sitar is so small that by the time you're about 2.5, 3 years old, it's already, we've grown out of it. So that's how early we sort of are music is brought into our this thing. So I mean, sitar, so I was sort of born with the sitar.
Yeah. Well, let me pursue that. What's the first tune you ever learned?
You know, I honestly don't remember. Because, as I said, I mean, it starts so early that by the time, I mean, it's before we start learning how to talk, we learn music.
Wow.
So I mean, I can tell you that, oh, this is the first tune I learned or something like that. But in all honesty, I have no idea what is the first tune I learned. But I do remember my first lesson, formal lesson, which wasn't until much, much later, because music was not something we did formally at that age. It was just something we did because it was around. There were musical instruments around, there were musicians that were sort of in and out of the house. So you were always making fun of other musicians or having jokes. So music was just games. It wasn't done seriously.
Yeah.
But until I was about 6 years old. I remember first formal lesson that I got from my dad as a 6-year-old kid. And that was not on the sitar, actually. That was a vocal lesson.
Oh.
Yeah. So I started off, but sitar was always there. But he wanted me to be a singer because that's his style of playing.
Have you kept up with that?
Unfortunately not. I gave my first vocal concert, when I was 9 years old. And I didn't formally start sitar until I was about 14.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what are some of the important influences in your music?
I think the strongest influence is my dad in Indian classical music. A few other great Indian maestros. But growing up sort of all over the world, music is something that you get inspired and inspiration from just various places, not necessarily even music itself. Sometimes, I think to be a good musician, one of the very important things to do is be aware of your surroundings and how they sort of affect you. So the conversation that we have should change what I play today. So you're always sort of looking for that inspiration around you.
So it's kind of an improvisation almost.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a dialogue, you know. I don't know what you're about to say.
Yeah.
And
We didn't rehearse this.
No.
Well, as I understand it, the sitar has evolved. What we have today is not what was in the beginning.
Absolutely.
How has it evolved? Can you give us a brief history?
I'll try and make it brief, but it starts in the 12th and 13th century. So there was this poet, philosopher, musician. He was this great person. His name was Amir Khusro. So the sitar is sort of, and a lot of other instruments are credited to him in India as his inventions. But the way he sort of invented the sitar was a very primitive instrument to play behind what we know today as Sufi music. So it was a 3-string instrument, and he was originally from Iran.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Sufi suggests mysticism, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. So he was originally from Iran, and he had come to India. So seh in Iran, in Persian, means 3. So it was a 3-string instrument. That's why it was called the sitar.
3.
Yeah. And it was a very primitive, small instrument like that, just to sort of play rhythmic chords behind a particular kind of music. It didn't really take off. So after that, there's a big lull in history of sitar. I mean, then around the 17th century, another sitarist came about, and he sort of developed the instrument further, and he created a lot of compositions and sort of gave the sitar this kind of a structure. But again, it was just all over the place. Then going back around the mid-1800s, my great-great-grandfather sort of started formalizing the sitar into this. And then a lot more development took place in my grandfather's time. And then my father completely sort of restructured the sitar. The overall look is the same, but it sort of made it more the size, the string, the thickness of the string, the size, the thickness of the gourd, and all of these measurements sort of became universal at my dad's time.
Oh, standardized.
Yeah, standardized, exactly.
Okay.
That's the word I was looking for.
And there's a foundation named after your father.
Yes, I started this foundation a few years back, Ustad Hidayat Khan Foundation, to sort of help its musicians and spread the music and the needs of older musicians, as in healthcare, or and also to sort of showcase upcoming young talent and so forth and so on.
How did you finance the foundation? I mean, it's a great idea.
It's a great idea, and I thought that it wouldn't be this hard financing something like this, but
it's a struggle.
It's a huge struggle. I mean, it's every once in a while we find some very charitable, large-hearted people, but unfortunately, it's not individuals; it's the corporate support that it requires, which is just very hard to find.
Yeah.
Because it's, again, I mean, if you sort of go out and do popular music, there's a lot of support and there's a lot of money and everything for that. But if you do something specialized like this, it becomes very hard.
Yeah, I understand. Now, I've read a lot of articles about your father, and they're all very laudatory, extremely laudatory. He's called the greatest of musicians. So, as the son, does this create a burden for you? Do you feel overshadowed by your father's reputation?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's the honest truth. Yeah, I mean, whenever you're connected to a legend so closely, it's very hard. But there's pluses and minuses in everything. The pluses, which are very obvious, is first of all, you get the best training. Secondly, his closest of his friends that were in and out of the house were also legends of music. So the training that you're getting, consciously or subconsciously, was just out of this world. And honestly, I mean, till date, I sort of think about things that they've said 20, 30 years back that didn't make sense at that point, start to make sense now, and I still feel that training is still helping me. The biggest, actually, it wasn't, I mean, the public pressure wasn't a problem, because you grow up with that, so you get used to it, and you know how to handle that. The biggest problem was your personal pressure. you get used to music of such a high caliber, you get used to thinking of such high caliber, that whenever you open your mouth and you say a word or you play the first stroke of the sitar, you fell short in your own head, in your own ears.
Which an outsider might not even notice.
No. So, I mean, a lot of times I would do a fairly decent job at a concert, but get off the stage feeling horrible. Just not feeling right. And if you're not feeling right, at some point, even the audience connects with that, you know?
Yeah.
So biggest pressure was me, actually. Now I've sort of come to a point where I'm like, I just ignore it. You know? It's a journey. Music is a journey, so you have to take it like that.
You have to be at peace with yourself.
Absolutely, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the upcoming concert in Princeton in November.
So this is a really interesting concert. This is another great maestro. He plays one of the very traditional instruments of India called sarangi. It's beautiful sounding. It's a very sort of ethnic tone to it. It's very haunting. It's a bowing instrument. So the Western audience will sort of relate to it because of the bowing and the sort of violent note sort of extension of that. His father also was a legendary sarangi maestro. We've known each other since we were kids, but we hardly met. I knew his father. I met his father many times. But Kamal Sabri is his name. We hardly met. So we got together in New York to do a recording. We had heard about each other. But we didn't know each other personally. I had a lot of respect for his music and everything. But music is just 20%. It's the meeting of minds and hearts that is the 80% of music, right? So I was kind of nervous about it. But we got together and we started playing, and it was like we've known each other forever. Really, it was amazing. It was magic. And so we said, you know what? We need to present this. So we made a recording, and then we said we have to get down and do a concert. So we're performing over here, and then we're doing a small tour in Washington and Richmond and just East Coast. We're doing, playing 4 or 5 concerts, but the beginning of the tour is going to be on November 11th.
Now, I've read that you enjoy working with other cultures, sort of like fusion. So I'm thinking maybe sometimes you work with rock musicians.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes you work with jazz musicians.
Yes, I've been very fortunate, yeah.
I was thinking, is it possible, you're all by yourself here, we don't have a rock band, but how would you adapt the sitar to rock? Can you give us an example?
Yeah, sure, definitely. I'll play something before I play something for you. So what I try to do is I try to not play a sitar like a rock guitarist.
Okay.
Because I don't like to, I did that when I was younger. I tried doing that. I had an electric sitar that sounded like a rock sitar. And then the whole, I didn't enjoy the charm in it. What I start doing is I start feeling the pulse of the music. So in my way, so I sort of interpret it in my way, and I put it together so there's a different texture. It doesn't sound like one rock guitarist and another sitarist trying to be a rock guitarist, because that just didn't sit with me.
Yeah.
So like there's the blues scale, you know.
Oh, that's very bluesy. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
sounds like it's coming out of Mississippi.
There you go. So you get the essence of that and sort of work with that. And then you can do.
So we did blues, we did rock.
There you go.
How about jazz? I'm really pushing it.
So jazz, obviously had a lot of exposure listening to jazz music and stuff. And then I had a chance to work on a big ensemble that was a tribute to Miles Davis.
Wow.
And we sort of toured around with a whole bunch of amazing cats all over the world, playing with them. But that particular album was very Indianized sort of jazz. So again, now this if you're working in the blues theme, so jazz is improvised music, so it's very close to sort of Indian music.
Yeah.
And so I try and sort of keep to my roots.
Of course.
And try and sort of fit into the song. And that's sort of my way of thinking about it.
Well, let me move along. How do you evaluate the work of Ravi Shankar, who introduced many of us to Indian music back in the 50s and 60s?
Well, again, a legend musician, and I just don't feel qualified enough to evaluate his music. But I think as a musician, one of his biggest contribution was that more than a musician, he was an ambassador to the world of music. So he sort of created an opportunity where he gave exposure to the world of what the Indian sound is, and gave us an opportunity to sort of play all over the world and be musicians living in Princeton and New York and stuff.
But he opened the door for Western people to appreciate this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and but during the time that he was performing, people didn't have in-depth knowledge of what he was doing, and it was a sort of a hippie era where it was a fad and it was cool and it was good to be high and and that whole era was such. But now, over the years, there's been a lot of development in the audiences. They have understanding of what you're doing. So now we're fortunate enough that we can actually play traditional music, and people actually know what we're talking about.
And so, moving on, how do you feel about the use of the sitar, say, by the Beatles?
Personally, not a huge fan. And the reason is because I'm a sitar player, I'm a musician, so the way they did it, I mean, for the time was great. I mean, but it seems very basic, and it seems now. I mean, I'm sure at that time it was great, and we take it for granted, you know.
Yes.
It's like salt.
Yeah.
Without that, we don't have taste, you know. But so I'm not a huge fan again. But
the Doors, Rolling Stone.
I mean, as it developed, right? It developed, and a lot of what happened was a lot of Indian musicians over the years that have sort of collaborated in a way that they have gone out of their skin to collaborate, and created this new genre, right? Now what is happening is a lot of the musicians are not going out of their skin to collaborate, but they're understanding the music and collaborating more. So we have more information on Western music, and it's become more of a part of our DNA. So we understand it on the second and the third tier. The older collaboration, I feel people understood the cultures only on the first level. And that's where the collaborations were. But at the same breath, some of the music is incredible. But every once in a while, you know. Now I find the collaborations to be more often than not, they're incredible.
More sophisticated.
Absolutely. Yeah. See, that's why you're sitting there.
So what were some of your most memorable concerts?
Too many, actually. I would say that performing with my dad has been like various places where I got like life's lessons. We were playing in India, Calcutta, and my dad would play very few concerts a year. He would play only about 10 concerts a year or something. So wherever he went to play, it was a big deal. So he was playing in Calcutta, which is the cultural epitome of India. And so there was a capacity of maybe, it was an outdoor event, capacity of maybe 3,500, 4,000 people. Double the amount of people were there. And right before we were about to start the concert, there was a fight about to break loose, you know, because there was no place to sit, you know, and there are people who had bought tickets, and there are people that just showed up. And I was about to sort of get upset, and I was about to sort of start screaming at the audience and everything, and because I was arrogant, and I felt it's my birthright. You've come to listen to me. How dare you make a noise, you know? But just before I was about to say something, my father sort of looked at the audience and he said, you know, I go all over the world to perform, and I get so much love, and I especially get so much love from everyone in Calcutta and in Bengal, and I see that you've come here with so much love, and you've taken out precious time out of your life to come and hear me, and I'm becoming an old man, and I see there are very few chairs, and there are lots more people. So please, I invite you to come and sit with me on the stage, or find space wherever you have so I can play.
Wow.
And the way he said that, the way he delivered that message, I'm not kidding, there were about 7,000-8,000 people over there. There was a pin drop silence within a second. People just sat wherever they were standing. They just, done. And he could start his music. And so that was a lesson of humility. And later on, when we went home, he tells me, he said, you're about to yell at the people that have, he said, there's some people in the audiences that can't even afford these tickets. He said, you have to be so grateful to know that they've given their time and money and come to listen to you. So you have to be appreciative. Huge lesson that sort of I learned, because I was 20-something years old performing all over the world. And my first reaction was like, how dare they?
Wow. That's a very moving story.
Yeah.
Wow. He really had the insight of a philosopher to calm the people.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like he wasn't just manipulating them, he was really speaking from the heart.
He meant it.
Yeah.
He absolutely meant it. I mean, and that's why I got the lecture when I got home.
So, are you constantly cultivating new audiences?
Well, hopefully today we've cultivated a few more people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's because world music, you have to bridge a cultural gap.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, you're also a teacher. What's your philosophy? What's your strategy for teaching of music?
Learn from the student. The way I taught a lot before, and I used to teach in a class situation where I have a class of a bunch of kids, adults come take a lesson and sort of go home. I was just not having fun doing that. I sort of revert back to how I learned music, and I try to be I try to make it a conversation when I'm teaching, because people learn music for various different reasons. Some to be professional, some because they like it, some because they just want to. This is a stress buster for their very stressful lives. So you have to sort of understand where they're coming from. And the most important thing about Indian music is, what's interesting is that in Indian music there are few things that are predetermined and pre-composed. One is a rag. Rag is a scale of notes. Then there's a composition that you make within that scale of notes. That composition has a rhythmic pattern that's decided. So these are the things that are pre-composed, and after that, it's about how you feel, your mood, what you're trying to express. So Indian classical music becomes one of the most easiest forms of musical expressions that you can express your emotions with. So that's what I try and teach students, that use this as, if you've had spicy food, play some spicy music. Whatever the mood you are in, if you're stressed out and you want something to relax, if you're hurt, if you're happy, whatever it is.
Can you play a scale for us? Like I'm a very basic student. I want to learn the scale.
So this is a basic scale. So this is set to a rag, right? Now, there are compositions that are based in this scale. Now, there is a very slight difference in the scale, is a different rag.
a minor key the second time.
So yes, so this was the right. So in the second one I went right. So this is a very popular rag in the Indian system, which is called Yaman. So there's very subtle differences between the scales, but that's how the sort of scales change. And the music is coming back, and the scales are centuries old. Like I told you about, and the compositions sometimes are also centuries old and that are still being played. So I told you, like you had asked me a question right in the beginning of the how the sitar sort of came about, and I said Amir Khusro was the person who made the sitar or created the sitar. So he created this melody also that we still play it till today.
So in the learning process, it's sort of a process, first the scales, then a few basic melodies, and only later on you can express your own moods.
Right. Right.
But it's a building block. It takes time.
Yeah.
How do you divide your time between the U.S. and India?
I love to travel. I get very bored. I get bored easily being in one place, and I like the different cultures. And if you see me in India, very different. My attire is different, and then I have friends also from very different walks of life, and I sort of enjoy in the diversity and the change. So I'm back and forth India. If I could have it, I'd be there for 2 weeks, and I'd be here for 2 weeks every 2 weeks.
Oh, ideally you'd split your time 50-50.
Yeah, but not like in one big stretch, you know. Go there multiple times a year, and then come back over here multiple times.
Well, we're about to wrap things up, but could you reiterate for our audience your two upcoming events?
Yes, so November 11th in Princeton is a classical Indian concert duet with a sarangi musician and myself and a tabla player. And in
what's the venue?
It's Princeton Unitarian Church.
Okay.
It's a really interesting small venue, but it's very good for Indian classical music because the audience is about 200. So it's close and it's tight. It has that very informal exchange over there. And then we're performing at the Lincoln Center, the Appel Room, on December 10th. With my jazz ensemble. That's actually, it's called Melodic Intersect. And we have been charting #1 for about 8 weeks in the world music charts in the US. And just today we got onto the Grammy ballot, so we're hoping, got our fingers crossed. Please pray for us. And come watch us on Lincoln Center on December 10th.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us here on East Brunswick Television.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
And we'll play something on the way out.
Something that I haven't released yet.
Okay.
From an upcoming album.